Welcome back, everybody, to the Weekly Intention, and this is Michael Mulder. I have a very, very special guest with me today, but before I get into her, I have a couple questions for you. Have you ever felt that you've been stuck in place? Have you ever dealt with something that's been earth-shattering? Have you ever just experienced something very, very traumatic that you haven't been able to move on from? On the other token, like me, I'm sure a lot of you have dreams. A lot of you think that you have more to give to yourself and more to give to other people. Well, if either of those messages resonated with either of you, then keep watching. Before we get into today's guest, I'll ask you one thing. If this helps you in any way, please share, subscribe, like it, do all those things. I try to get this out to as many people as possible. I'm really just trying to help people understand that the people I bring to you are no different than you. So that being said, the guest to my left is honestly the best one I've had so far, and I mean that. She's done some truly incredible things. Even now, she's gone through some really, really terrible things in her life too, and she's living proof that bad things that happen to you do not disqualify you from future greatness. And if you're willing to take your story and morph it into something that is purposeful and can help others, your life can really, really have meaning. So with that being said, welcome to Weekly Intention, Rachel Price.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
How was that for an intro?
Loved it.
So you guys know how it goes. You know, typically if somebody has a really, really great story, we'll break down the entire story before. And my message today is really around trauma and how you can get past trauma and use that to fuel you. So I think a really, really great place to start for you is, you know, before you had hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, before you were a first Phorm athlete, before you were crushing NPC shows, and all these cool things that you're doing now, you know, you've had a pretty traumatic experience, you know, in your past, and that also fueled you and propelled you to move forward. So,
100%.
You know, I'd love to talk about your family a little bit, talk about your brother and your experience of, you know, how you got here.
Absolutely. So we'll start from the beginning. So I guess I'll start my junior year of high school. I always just felt like I never really belonged anywhere, and that's kind of an ongoing theme of my life. And so I was a junior, my brother was a senior, and he ended up getting jumped by his friends, and they left him for dead, literally. And from there, I decided, you know, let me bring him into my friend group. And that's when our sibling relationship really changed. We had like a typical sibling thing going on before, the rivalry, the whole deal. We would never hang out. We never brought our friends together. But once he lost his friends his senior year, he became very involved in my friend group. And from there, he obviously being jumped, he was at his lowest, and he felt incredibly weak because he was. And from there, I'm like, what can we do? So him and we created a gym alliance, is what I like to think of it. And him and I just started going to the gym every single day together, you know, waking each other up. You're fat, get up. You know, we had this whole thing where every day it was like just him and I at the gym. And that's really when it started between both of us. It's really what set us apart from our friend group as well, because that's something that him and I always just did together. And it pulled him out, and he was able to, once he got stronger, you know, he had a sense of himself again.
So you're saying from the beginning, him getting jumped kind of took him away from himself, and it changed, you know, everything. Was he acting just shaky, like?
For sure. I think, you know, my biggest thing is everything happens for a reason. And that was God's reasoning of just bringing him closer, at least to me. And for that time being, it was so important that he did reground himself. And that was so key in his life, because if that wouldn't have happened, I don't know where we would be.
I think we should start even before that. Like, why was he regrounding himself? If you want to talk about, I guess, like, the substance abuse and how he had gotten jumped in the first place. Right.
So tracking back, my brother, from 8th grade on, he started dabbling with drugs. We were from Orange County, California, and we call them like housewife drugs, but it would be Xanax, anything, you know, those antidepressive drugs that these kids could get their hands on because they were at home. And that started a spiral for my brother with prescription drugs. And it never was these street drugs. It wasn't heroin. It wasn't any of that. It was always these prescription drugs. And so from 8th grade on, he would be dabbling in them on and off. And his friend group was awful. Obviously, anyone who's going to jump you and leave you for dead is
Probably not a great
not
friend.
good. No. So I think that's really when my saving as a sister came in. Cause I always protected him, even when we were younger, when he would get in trouble and the parents would be freaking out, I would always try and just protect him.
That's crazy. I have an older sibling, but I never had experienced anything like that growing up in small town South Dakota. I had a sister that was 7 years older, and I got into trouble, but it was never anything like earth-shattering or something that my parents didn't know how to deal with. So that's interesting that you were like almost like a parent figure for him and somebody who could understand him better to get into fitness and really pull each other together. So after you guys started fitness, I know this thing took a ton of different turns with, you moving into fitness, him moving out of it, and you guys, kind of separating.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, after the whole thing happened with his friends, then we decided to go to college together. And my parents thought, what better than to send them off to school as siblings, and then they're going to be roommates. So they ended up getting us an apartment together. We didn't do dorm living. And so, that was fun for us to just get out on our own. And it was a great time at first, but there was always these very apparent differences between my brother and I where, I never understood his mindset. Like his mindset was party, 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 even on Monday morning. Whereas I'm in the books on Monday and he couldn't pull himself out of that. And I think that's really where I became educated on addiction in the brain, because I knew that he didn't even have a choice. Like for him, Monday wasn't an option. It was like all in, burn it on both ends. And that's something I could never understand with him.
That is crazy, because even in college, like I think about being 22 or 21, like you wanted to party a lot. I mean, I loved partying, don't get me wrong. Like I was going to the bars, but there's never a thing like Monday morning, like having a desire to ever want to do that. So I imagine that was, I guess, hard to see and hard to deal with. How did you approach him in that situation, and how did you, I guess, before it really started to get bad, how did you try to pull him out of that or get him to stop?
Right. And so it was little things. And this happened over the course of 3 months where I just kept trying to reel him back in. But this time I knew it was different, because now we're not under 18. So we don't have my parents there anymore. And so there was these differences where now we are out on our own and we're living together and all these things. And every time I would try, then I knew he was further away. So it was like every failure was clarity to me that, we're two separate people and that I couldn't save him. So from there, I went home for summer and I came back and the house is just in shambles and, everything was not how I left it. And so I decided to move out. Thankfully I did. He ended up getting in big trouble with the feds and whatnot, for actually dealing drugs. So from there, he ended up going to jail. And then the biggest blessing of all, I'd have to say, was his court mandated rehab. And that's kind of where he was able to find some peace for a little bit of time. But
that's a hard time, like when you're in that moment where you have to make a decision on whether you're going to pull back and do your own thing and you're doing everything that you can, or whether like you're going to let this drag you down. And I don't know, I've had situations that weren't even that severe where I've had to think about those things myself, where it's like I need to do things for my own mental sanity or my clarity and kind of back away. Was that tough for you, like emotionally, just to have to do that? And how did you feel about having to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I looking back, and this is another huge theme, is that you don't realize you're going through trauma until you're on the other side. So for me, it became like my new norm, because every 2 weeks we were going through these huge problems, whether he got a DUI or whether he, was in jail or whatever it was. These were these big life-changing things that were occurring in his life all the time. And for us, it just became the new norm where, I was constantly telling myself I was okay. And, I'm so blessed and I have all these things, which was so true. But at the same time, it's like, behind closed doors, that wasn't the case.
Kind of like faking a certain type of lifestyle and trying to keep up with something, even though it's like everything is chaotic and messy in the background.
For sure. And it's like any family that deals with an alcoholic or addict can relate, where there's not anyone, nobody's open enough about it. And so we were constantly hiding it as a family. Like he didn't show up. Oh, he was sick. We'd always come up with excuses for him. And that was part of the problem too. Huge problem.
Did he seem broken? Like the more that time moved on and the more disconnected you got, did his personality just seem like broken and defeated, or how did he change over time?
I mean, over time it was very dependent on where he was, and it was so hard because at one point, like, we felt like we had him back 100%. And that's the tricky thing about addiction and alcoholism, is that it just takes one decision to put them right back on that path again. So it was like over and over again, we'd be like, we have him back, you know, he's 100%, he's him again. And then 2 weeks later, he's lying to everyone, you know, and it was this constant circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Addiction is weird when your body gets physically and mentally addicted to it. It's like you're willing to do anything to make that happen. And it's just really, really sad.
Right.
So as you get further into fitness and you're getting into like your first contest and you're starting to really take it, you know, to the next level, this is kind of where it gets sad. And I don't want to try to paraphrase anything. I'll just
of course. Yeah. So my brother, he was sober for 3 years. And that was, like I said, the biggest blessing of our lives, having him for that time. And I do believe God blessed us with that, just so we could have that to look back on. But I started after I graduated from school, from college, from NAU, then I dove into my first NPC show. And first show went really well. Second show was right around the corner. My brother was going to come to the show, and we could tell he was using again. So my mom is the biggest savior of all, I'd say, as a parent. You know, you just want your child to be okay. So she was doing everything that she could in that time to bring him back, but we all kind of knew as a family. And at that point, me and my father, we were done. I think we were just so hurt that we couldn't take anymore. And so we kind of loved at a distance was our favorite way. And these are things that we even learned in Nar-Anon, which is the group for addicts' families, which was key for my healing too, was to actually be in the presence of other families that were dealing with what I was dealing with. But
that's really sad, and I don't know, you know, what it takes again to have to break away from somebody in love, you know, at a distance. I've had friends, like I'd said, where I feel like I had to kind of push them away and let them do their own things. And a lot of times when I would see somebody do that, that's the best thing for that person.
For sure.
The best thing for you to do is to move on, because that's the reality check that somebody, you know, would need.
For sure.
There was this. I think I told you about this. There's this kava bar that we go to, and recovering addicts will go to there, and it like helps them maintain their sobriety. And a lot of people will just go there, and it'll keep them clean, and it helps them like mentally just deal with that and stay clean. And there's this one person, Devin, who went there all the time, and he ended up getting banned because one time he just showed up there like shooting fireworks off, doing all these crazy things in the parking lot, like just like total nutcase. So they had to like ban him from this place, and it was shortly after this that he was gone, because he had done something. I don't really know what he had done, but he was just gone.
Yeah, and so I think me and my dad at that point were just so let down, and then my mom was, you know, going off and doing her own thing. So I continued on my own way, and my second show came about, and he canceled like 3-4 days before. And during this time, he was also asking my mom if he could move back in, all these things. And they were like, no, you know. So the show came around, and I'll kind of leave this short, but I call this chicken problems. And so with competition prep, we're so obsessed with like salt and just these dumb things. And so I remember I was cooking chicken, and I overcooked the chicken. It's the day before my show, and I like fall on the ground, and I just start crying. And it's like, my mom walks in, and she's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you serious right now? You're crying over chicken. Like, you could be praying for these problems tomorrow. And that to me is the most profound thing in my life. And I will refer to this forever, because the next day, I lost my brother, and it was in between prejudging and finals. And so with these competitions, we go on first in the beginning of the day, and then we go on later. And so I was about to go on for prejudging. I couldn't find my parents anywhere, and I ended up walking out to the parking lot, and I saw my dad on his knees, crying, bawling his eyes out, and I just knew. But I went on stage and everything, and my parents were already waiting for me backstage, and I looked at my mom, and I just said, he's gone, isn't he? And she said, yeah. And I don't remember saying any of this, but I guess I said he's dancing with the angels. He's free. Like he's in heaven. And then my whole life changed right there. So I always refer to that story as chicken problems. And it's a very common theme where whenever I feel like, these small things that are getting to my head, they're so minute in the big story, in the big picture.
In the grand scheme of things. Mm-hmm. I'm really sorry. That's really sad. And I know it's something that will probably be with you forever, good or for bad or
right.
whatever that might be. I think when you think of moving on or before even moving on, the fact that you went on and did the show after you knew that, to be in that headspace, I imagine that was just like a surreal fog of just existing at that point. And then to deal with something like that just in the moment when you feel something that's so final or something that feels like that, it's just like a shock.
Yeah.
My mom has cancer, and it was 4 months ago that she called me and she told me this on the phone. And I remember I just was laying on the floor for an hour and I just couldn't move. I just was laying, not to take away from your situation. No. It's just I understand that mindset of, what could happen with life and what.
It's in that moment, everything becomes so real. The curtain is pulled back, and you can just see things as they are. Which really is exactly what they are, as weird as that sounds. When they told me without my brother, all I remember is just looking around and seeing things, the world is swirling around you, but yet, and we have to make these moves at that moment, but it's paralyzing.
And meanwhile, we worry about all these things that are so minuscule and they're not even, a big problem. And it's life could be gone tomorrow. I don't know if you saw this thing, but this kid passed away just this weekend in Scottsdale, and horrible. They don't know what happened to him. And it's just every time something like that happens, it just reminds me how short it is. And even if you live a full life, it's that is so short in the grand scheme of things. And I just think it's unfortunate to wonder why those things happen, or try to make sense of them, or try to understand what to do next. And I think that, I guess, goes well into the next 3 months. And you talked about, I figured it was the Dark Knight or something. You had a reference for that.
Well, it actually occurred. I actually ended up pushing my grief down for almost 2 years. I'm not going to lie. It was all the way from 2017 to 2019 that I didn't even deal with it or look it in the face at all. I was incredibly involved in a toxic relationship, and I was just using any excuse to not think about it. And then it hit me like a train. So I moved to Arizona and I left my training business. I decided to go online at that point. There were just different things from the outside where I know I was telling you before, but I lost my Instagram. It was disabled, and so I move out here and I have this dream of having this online coaching business. And then the week I move, I lose my account, and I lose the relationship that I had been in for 4 years, and incredibly toxic. So it was a good thing that it happened, but,
a lot of loss. But even before you move into this, I think this is a key point, to moving on, because when you think about whether that's, your brother and making you value and realize life, people in their careers or their relationships, or, they're not happy where they are in their body, or there's just so many things that could be wrong for them. There's no way to I guess manage things like that. Sometimes it's tough to manage that. So, this thing happened with your brother. That was a shot of clarity for you. You're making all sorts of bad decisions. But from what I understand, part of that was grinding, your ass off at Equinox, doing personal training for 13 to 15 hours a day. And I know Andy Frisella. I mean, I pray to God Andy Frisella sees this. If you see this, I hope I'm stoked about it right now. But he's been a big influence on my life, and I would love, before you even talk about Arizona, talk about that moment with him, talk about, leaving Equinox and just the peace of mind that brought you.
Yes. So I was training in Newport Beach at this luxury gym Equinox, and I'd been there for over a year, but it was a burnout job, just all these hours. And I knew what I wanted to do with my life, and I knew I wanted to own my own business potentially. I just didn't know how to pull the trigger. So about 3 months after I lost my brother, I want to say this is in September of 2017, I'll never forget, I found the podcast just by random. I don't know how I found it, but I remember sitting in a tanning booth of all things, and Andy was talking, and I just chills after chills, and I'm a big chills person. Like I listen to that kind of stuff, and I exactly, it happens all the time. And so I just was like, who is this person? I felt like I had this personal connection with him. And then, you know, everything he had to say, I resonated with so hard, because like I was bound by a victim mentality at this point. I hadn't done any recovery or known anything about it, but it was like, he gave you the tools to actually make these changes in your life, and like no more excuses, no more covering it up, you know. And so that was, I'd say the first point of healing was just finding the podcast and then being able to actually do those things in my life. So I'd say within three weeks of listening, I quit my job. I decided to start my own training business. I took one client with me, and I trained her out of a park for 6 months. You know, and by that time I had built up to 15 people, and I was able to get my own gym space and whatnot. But, you know, I didn't know that any of it was going to work out. I didn't even have step one. You know, step one was just quitting the job, you know. And so that's, I guess, the biggest step is like when people ask me, what did you do? How did you build your business? How did you walk away from a gym? I was like, I literally just quit my job. And then I had to figure out where I was going to train this person, you know? So it's like,
I have two questions, because I think people are in this situation a lot, and a lot of people are watching this. If you're unhappy in your job, you're unhappy in this thing. It's like, one, you feel bound by grief, or you feel like you're not worthy. And if you don't feel like you're worthy of change, you're not going to make the change. Mm-hmm. And then two, it's like, even if you think that you're worthy of making the change, like that fear can paralyze some people. What would you say to somebody that, one, is being bound by grief on how to get past that grief? Mm-hmm. And two, in that moment, you know, it's easy to say you quit, but how can you bring yourself to do that?
Yeah. So finding healing from grief, I mean, I'd have to say the biggest thing is allowing yourself to. Because for me, I wouldn't even allow myself to think about it, you know? And so it truly took time of, you know, I had to get a therapist. I had to do these things where, we had to break down my life, and I call it the bare minimum. Like if you're struggling with your mental health, then you cannot expect your business to take off, and you can't expect to do all these baseline things if, you know, the bottom isn't completely full. So I'd say with grief and finding healing from grief, it's literally just being kind to yourself. And I think that I used work, I used competition prep as any way to beat myself further into the ground, because I wasn't happy with who I saw in the mirror. And I think it just took time of being okay with not being okay, truly.
It's interesting that you say that, because you'll see a lot of productive people who are doing things, but they're still not necessarily happy. Just because you have a high salary job, that doesn't equate to happiness. Just because you're in incredible shape, like you could be mourning something very, very heavy inside. So when you say like, let yourself be okay, what was that feeling like for you? Like you were overcome by grief, you were beating yourself into the ground, you were listening to that podcast. Obviously there was a switch, but like, how did that happen? Like, how did you tell yourself, like, hey, I deserve something better than this?
I'd have to say it took outside help. You know, I couldn't have done it myself, in the sense that I was so in my head. I'm a type A personality. I'm a super perfectionist. I will not show my weaknesses. Yes. And that's honestly my number one weakness, is the fact that I won't show it, because, you know, no one can help you if you're hiding everything. And that's what I had done for, 2 years. And that's why I call it the dark night of the soul, because it was finally the time that I surrendered, and like full surrender, where you're just like, I have nothing else, this is the only option. And that was rock bottom for me, and so I had to hit that rock bottom to even know I was low, because I got so used to it. I was so used to anxious feelings and depression. It became like my everyday norm, but yet I'd never been anxious in my life. I'd never been depressed. I hadn't dealt with either of those. And so for me, I also felt like there was something wrong with me. Like I have all these blessings, and I'd feel this constant guilt. Like, why do I feel this way? It's not right when kids are starving, all these things. But healing that trauma inside was the only thing that could help me see my blessings, because I would just be bound by that victim mentality forever.
That can be the difference. I mean, that is the difference in somebody who does something and somebody who doesn't. Like, just the way that you talk to yourself on a daily basis and the things that you're saying, and even being like mindful of that. I know full well what it's like to be like a scrawny kid that hated himself. And even when I moved out here, you know, trying to fill that void with women, with partying, with whatever I could, like, to make it look like I was the man, make it look like I was cool and doing all the right things, but inside being completely miserable and just not feeling good. But, you know, in a sense, I also felt like I deserved it. I felt like I'm doing this to myself because I deserve it. And I think and I know you might agree with this, like, I think a big part of it was like faith. I went to CCV, my buddy took me there, and I just like started like crying in church, like profusely. And I didn't even know why I was crying. And then I just realized, like, the weight of my decisions. How has faith played a role in, you know, you overcoming trauma and realizing that there's a bigger picture out there for people?
I mean, my favorite, one of my favorite verses is, it's God knows the number of days that you're on this earth, and you won't live a second longer, you know? And so for me, that gave me peace in losing my brother and knowing that, you know, this was God's plan. And there's another verse in the Bible that talks about saving, you know, when someone dies, it could be because you're saving them from evil to come. And so that for me was also what gave me peace. But I have a very strong faith background. And so, you know, these things came from a lifetime of faith, but faith was everything. You know, it was like, at the end of the day, like, just knowing that my brother was in heaven was the only thing that could give me peace at that point. Nothing else, for sure.
The finality of it almost changed in your mind. It went from like being a bad thing to he's not hurting anymore. He's not hurting himself.
Exactly. And like my first words after he died, I can't believe it. I still won't believe it. My mom tells me all the time, like, yeah, that's really what you said. I'm like, what? I just must have been in shock. But those were God's words coming out of my mouth, you know? So
I'm sure that he would be proud of you now.
For
sure that he is proud of you now.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you're here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
That's really heavy, and it's just sad because this happens more often to people than not, and they feel like they have no resources and they have nothing. And I think that, you know, if people take anything from this story, it's like faith, you know, not being afraid to accept help and not be afraid to expect more for yourself or want more for yourself. Like, those three things will change your life right there in the way that, you know, you're thinking about things.
For sure.
And once you're able to deal with all those things, it's like now we're getting into who you really are. So being able to move on from things, I mean, I remember clearly from my life, it wasn't to this extent again, but I remember like the moment I had started to ask myself for more, and I resonate so much with the fitness people I bring on because that's what changed my life wholeheartedly. Like, that was the catalyst for every other component of my life. So I just am so... When people say, like, what's the deal with working out, or people say, like, why do you like it, or, like, it's just the gym, or, like, they make comments like that, it just drives me up a wall because they don't understand, like, the true value of it and what it actually means. And I'm just like,
this is my healing.
Yeah.
this is it.
This is the only thing that makes me feel like, for a long time, it was the only thing that made me feel good about myself. Like, that was it. That was the only thing that I had that made me feel like I was worthy of anything. And... yeah. I mean, it's awesome that your brother gave that to you. I always think that you have to be able to, like, look at clues in your life, and you have to be able to look at things and understand why they're happening to you. And part of that healing is allowing yourself to see the good in it. And that's how you were able to take that situation and move to something greater.
Right.
So now you do it. You literally quit your job. You're like, enough is enough, which I'm sure a lot of people envy. You know, a lot of people are in this situation where they're just not happy and they want to do it, and you make that move. And I imagine that felt like
scary,
terrifying, but like you just threw off like 100-pound bodysuit at the same time.
For sure. I mean, it was exhilarating at the same time because all of a sudden I felt this sense of freedom and this sense of like, okay, I can literally do anything that I want at this point. So you know, going back, there are no steps ever. And that's the one thing that I think if I could have told myself back then, like, you're never going to have the perfect out. It will never be like that 100%. And so if it's in the back of your head, that's a God sign, you know, and that's how I kept thinking of it, was like, if this is constantly coming back to me, then this is something that I need to do.
people need to like listen to themselves more often, their intuition, because every single time you don't listen to your intuition, it's always going to come back to you. It happens all the time. Right. My friend Kellen that you just interviewed, he was a professional baseball player. He played for the Royals. He was an Oregon pitcher. Like, he's got an incredible mindset. And one thing that I've really, really learned from him is he talks about intuition and how you need to listen to that voice inside yourself, because if you don't, it's going to come up forever and ever and ever.
Drive it crazy.
And you could be 60 years old and it's still going to happen. Yeah. But at that point, it's like, that's no longer, I'm not doing it. It's regret. It's regret of the thing that I didn't do. Right. And my wish for people more than anything, like especially in the society, is how do we move away from this stigma of like, you have to do X, Y, and Z to be happy and check all these boxes to do these right things, because we're killing ourselves inside for no reason.
Right. And I think we all try and fit in this box of whatever we see on social media or whatever it is. But you know, we're seeing a tiny, tiny reel, like what you said earlier about when people look at my page, like you would have no idea. And that's why I try to bring in reality and whatnot. But it's like we all put out what we want people to see.
Well, it's difficult because you have a brand. I mean, like right or wrong, like you're here to empower women and you're here to help them. And like that's a certain portrayal. And like to a certain extent, it's like it's your business. I'm trying to grow my business.
Definitely.
So how do you balance that? But even before we get into this huge thing, you getting hit up by Andy Frisella to join First Phorm. If you guys don't know what First Phorm is, it's one of the best supplement companies in the entire world. The best. It is the best.
For sure.
It's expensive, but like he says, I want to make the best product. If you can't afford it, I would rather have you say that than say that my stuff is second best. And I think that is so incredible. And he's got such an amazing story himself, from like sleeping on a couch to like building this thing for 10 years with no money and all the things that he went through.
For sure.
And that's why I respect his brand and respect him as a person.
Yes.
And then he's reaching out to you to join this brand and be an ambassador of this brand.
Yeah, that was a life-changing moment, I'd have to say, because at that point I had been, you know, my social media was growing when he did find me, and I had found First Phorm through the MFCEO project. I actually became a Legionnaire, just working within the brand. And so my entire life, common theme, I know I said this before, was I never belonged. I never felt like I belonged. Always only had one friend, never had a friend group, bullied pretty badly all through middle school and whatnot. So I always felt like I didn't belong, like there was something like inherently wrong with me. So the way Andy talked, I knew he felt that way too. So it was just like, I felt like I had this buddy that, you know, knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so, you know, I was at my low, and I'll never forget, I was sitting on the couch one night and I get DM from Andy Frisella, and that he had started following me, and he DM'd me and he said, I love what you're doing on your page. Something along the lines of like, your content is awesome. And I remember that day, like earlier in the day, I was like, my content is crap. Like, I'm keep doing the same thing. Like, this sucks. And here's Andy telling me like, I love what you're doing, you know? And it was just like, my whole life changed that day.
Before we even move any further, I think that I wasn't even expecting to go down this path, but I think it's so, like, I've been doing this for over a year, and it's so easy to get discouraged and say, this sucks, this is bad, like, and just have that terrible voice. And that can be a source of quitting for people too. It's like, how long can you deal with that? And I think a good, I guess, point for anybody listening when it comes to that is like, how can you continue to move on even if you're having a lack of belief? How can you continue to move on even if you're feeling bad? In fact, this morning, I was lifting at the gym. I felt sick this morning, like legit sick. And I went to the gym and I just was like, you know, some days you're moving the weight and sometimes the weight's moving you. And I was doing shoulder presses, and usually I can do 95, no problem for 10s, and I just do 10s and I'm like, I'm good. But today I was like doing like 7 or 8 or 9, and I was just getting so pissed because I'm like, why can't I do this? And then I threw on Andy Frisella. I was listening to him talk about being really, really heavy, and he was like, this is the worst that it's ever going to get. And then I just was, I was pushing more weight, and then I got through it. So what would you say to somebody that is in the situation that you were in, where they're like, my content is crap, whatever is crap, my fitness is crap. What would you say to somebody that was in your shoes that would help them keep moving?
The one thing is it takes one relationship to change your life forever. And that's been the biggest key in my life, was that, like, you know, do you resonate with what you're doing? And if the case is yes, then you need to continue doing it no matter what it is. Whether it be, singing or writing music or, whatever it is, if you find peace or if that's what you love to do, you have to continue doing it. And it doesn't, even if you do it for 10 years and then it's that one person that walks in and says, hey, I have a record deal for you, whatever it is. And for me, it was Andy coming in and saying, hey, I want you to be a part of this brand. And then I was a part of something bigger than me, and so that it was huge, but it just takes that one relationship or that one thing that happens and you don't know when it's going to happen, so you have to continue every single day, in the hopes, and you have to see the bigger picture. And I think that for me was like, what do I want? And even today, I still track back to that. Like, we have to have that inside.
Incorporating your why.
Exactly.
You had a really, really strong why. Exactly. And I also think too, like the power of people believing in you. Mm-hmm. Like I remember a time similar to you in South Dakota, people were always picking on me, bullying on me. Now it makes sense why that was happening. But back then it sucked. I was like, I'm not like these people. I didn't like it. Even in college, everyone was wanting to settle down and do these things. And it never resonated with me. I was like, I don't understand why people want to do this. And it didn't make sense. And then coming down here, in meeting people, like the person that you just met, it's like they see something in you that you don't see in yourself.
Exactly.
And that's such a crazy thing. When I started this, I would say this out loud to myself. I would say, Andy Frisell is going to see this one day. And I would just say that. I would say that over and over in the beginning. And then it's like, you knew my buddy Will. Yeah. And that's how I was able to get a hold of you. And now he's going to see this. And like, I cried a little bit. I cried to my girlfriend the day that happened. I cried because I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe that was like actually like a reality. But the only way that can happen is if you
one relationship.
Yeah, you have your why and you keep moving.
Exactly. And like if you wouldn't have continued on with this podcast, I wouldn't be here today. Exactly. Like it's all such a bigger picture. It's all happening when we don't know it. And that's the thing is like when we are aligned with our purpose, then things do happen. The power of manifestation, the power of the law of attraction, like they're God things and they're all happening in the universe, and I think becoming in tune with that too was such a big thing for me because I always felt like everything was by fault, but at the end of the day, like every closed door was a better door opened.
It's all where you point your mind, and it's all what you see to be true because I've been getting so into that manifestation, piece of it because it's so crazy how whenever you're having a bad day or whenever you're having bad things, you're just telling yourself that this sucks. You're telling yourself that this is
attracting it right back in.
This is like bad. And I've had, tough, weeks, months with my mom when traumatic things happen to you and hard things happen to you. It's hard to be present because you're just dealing with all this shit. And it's like, this is taking all my mental energy, or even if you're in a job that you don't like, it's taking all your energy. Mm-hmm. What would you say to somebody that is struggling to maintain or even get that clarity that's going through all those things? How would you help somebody with your experience even gain that clarity in a tough moment?
So this is something that I teach to my clients today, and it's ants, killing the ants, automatic negative thoughts. So we're going to be in our heads all the time. And unless we actually literally jot out our psycho thoughts on paper to actually look at them, like I'm a failure. I'll never be, I'll never be an elite athlete, or I'll never be these things or whatever. And you write it down on the piece of paper and you look at it for what it is. Like, and then you tell yourself, is it true or is it not true? 99% of the time it's not true. So it's like when we're able to see things for as they are, but if you have it swirling up in your head, like you're screwed, you're always going to be in that state. But once you're able to like literally just jot down, it doesn't matter how psycho it sounds or, how negative or self-hating it is, that's the only way you can actually find love again with yourself is like, is this true?
Challenging the thoughts.
Right.
Killing the ants.
Exactly.
That's a new one.
Killing the ants.
There's so many different ways to see that, but I love that one. That's an easy one to like do.
I mean, 96% of our thoughts are like automatic every single day. So it's like we only have 4% to move around, like maybe 10% for some people that have like a very active brain. So it's like, we have to take ourselves out of that.
Be aware of the thoughts. Mm-hmm. Awareness is really everything. And I've talked about that a lot, but I don't think you can ever talk about awareness too much. I really don't.
No.
And I find that the more you spread good things, in your life, like on a daily basis, and maintain that consistency, which is actually a great segue into where you are now. But like the more you maintain that consistency and the more you maintain like whatever it might be, things that make you feel good, they compound over time.
Right.
And now I'm eating good. Now I'm exercising.
Yeah.
Now I've got X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, wow.
Right.
Sometimes I look back on my life, just like even where I'm at, and I'm like, I never even like thought I could even be here, because I remember one point very distinctly where I thought that I deserved nothing.
Yeah. I mean, it's those slight edge decisions that truly change the trajectory of your life. Like we'll probably talk about it in the future, but like 75 hard, it's 5 tasks a day, easy to do, easy not to do, but will they change your life? 100%. So it's like, even if you just wake up and make the choice to drink more water that day, you know, that's going to change your life.
Yeah.
So
we can definitely talk about that. We've talked about overcoming trauma. We've talked about like being at a crossroads and leaving your job and stepping into your passion. Those are huge things. Now it's like maintaining it. I use my trauma to power myself, and how do I maintain it? And all the things that you're doing now are so like awesome and incredible. I've followed you for, I don't even know how long. Sometime I forget how. Jerry Valentine. Oh my gosh. I know him, the DJ guy. And
I love him.
He showed me you, and I was like, "Who's that?" I was like, "That's awesome. Cool." And then I saw you were part of Phorm, and then I was like, "Wow, she's doing like." I work out really hard, and she's making me look like a chump. I'm like, I don't work out this hard. I feel like I push myself.
I love it.
But yeah, I think discipline is a huge component of life, and I think discipline will be what keeps you moving. Awareness can be good, like knowing your why can be good, but really if you want to step into greatness and do something that's special, discipline is the thing that's going to take you there. So let's talk about, your bodybuilding contest.
Yeah.
Let's talk about 75 hard. Let's talk about all that stuff.
Yes.
I love it all.
Yes. So when it comes to discipline, and I don't even call myself like a super disciplined person, but it's just having those things ready for you. Like, do I want to sprint every day? Absolutely not. But, when I set my shoes out every night and I have the clothes, and it makes it just one decision easier to actually make that. So you got to set yourself up for success, and it's like you have to know somewhere around where you want to go, but make it easy. Like, don't set yourself up to fail. And that's what I'd constantly been doing in the past too. I'd say, okay, tomorrow's my new life. Let me start 15 new things. Like, no, it's not attainable. It's not sustainable. It's not. So I always say start with one thing a day, or one thing a week, and then add on the next thing, whatever it may be. But you can't change everything in one day.
It gets to be too much. It's like if you try to change every component of your life, it's like circuit overload. There's no way that it's going to happen.
Right.
And I have to say, when it comes to discipline, you're the first person to ever come in here with printed out notes of things that we discussed. I was so impressed by that. I was like, that's awesome. She cares that much.
Yes.
That's really, really cool. Aww. And that means a lot to me too. Aww. But when we think about like discipline and daily tasks, 75 hard is, I couldn't create anything better than that. It's so simple, but it's so complex at the same time. Like you had said, it's like basically 70. Can I explain? Is that cool?
Please.
Awesome.
Please.
75 hard. I've never done it. I've honestly been on the fence. Not even on the fence. I know I need to do this, but I know when I do it, like I have to do it. If I don't complete it, I'm going to be like a mess on myself.
It's even worse.
Yeah. No, I'm like, I have to do this once I start it. So I'm like, okay, again, there's no good time to do this, but it's 75 days. You do all these critical tasks, and basically it's like taking a picture of yourself every day, drinking a gallon of water every day, 2 workouts every day, one's outside for 45 minutes, reading 10 pages every day, and you have to do these tasks every single day for 75 days, and if you miss one piece of one day, you have to start the entire thing over. And what it's designed to do is it's designed to like, it's like discipline meets accountability meets like, what am I capable of? Because you think it's so simple until you're like, oh my God, I got to drink a gallon of water every day. I have to do 2 workouts like every day. And again, I can't speak to actually doing it. That's where you come in because I haven't done it, but.
Right. And it builds that resilience too. Cause it's like every day. And here's the thing is like, we're all structured people. We're always going to be inclined to be structured. Nobody wants to change, but with 75 hard, you have random things thrown at you. Like life is never, you have to go on vacation with your family for 10 days. you don't get to drink and you need to work out twice a day. Like those types of things happen where it builds this resilience in you where you're like, okay, I don't have, an option. We are doing this,
Yeah.
So
there's no other choice.
I'd have to say it built the most momentum in me for the first, like even just the first 2 weeks of being in it. It was like a high almost because you start believing in yourself again. And 75 hard was really, I've done it now 3 times, but the first time I did it was before I even sought help with therapy and everything. And that was like, it kind of saved me and led me into getting help for myself. But doing those daily tasks pushed me out of my own mentality.
I have to commit to this now.
You do. It's life-changing.
Yeah, I have to.
I'll always go back to it.
I even wrote that on my yearly thing, on my yearly goals, and I'm tracking. I mean, I've made a goal for the show, I made a goal for fitness, and I made a goal for 75 hard, so I have to do it. But
yeah, they can all go together.
Yeah, they can all go together. Let's do it at once. You just finished a bodybuilding competition, and so many people talk about bodybuilding, and I don't want to get like super in the juice head world because like I like it, but I'm like, I know it doesn't appeal to everybody, but I think the discipline aspect behind what you're doing is so incredible, even beyond 75 hard, because you're rationing your foods, you're doing all these things. You just crushed your last competition, you won it. Talk to people about what it takes to pursue excellence, like truly pursue excellence. There's doing something, and there's doing something to the fullest of your ability. And I feel like for a lot of people, they're doing things good, but they could be doing things better. They could be asking more from themselves, and they're not. How do you train your mind to go from a state of good, where I've done 75 hard, I'm doing all these things, to I'm going to be excellent?
Right. And so I'd have to say the biggest thing would be meditation. As crazy as that sounds, like to have the right daily intention of setting it for yourself and then keeping that peace throughout the day. So it's like for me, if I have, a crazy morning and I don't meditate, then I'm not going through my day with intention, and so it's like all these things can be happening, but when you set a daily intention in the morning, then you can always track back to that no matter how much goes on throughout your day. So until I was able to become sound mentally, then I couldn't be elite or, excel beyond, because I had too much crap going on upstairs, and it was like, just let me clear this out. And it's like before, when I texted you and I was here, I was sitting in my car meditating, and it's like, we have to realize that we are exactly where we are supposed to be in this moment. And when we come to peace with that every day, and when whatever task you're doing and that, then you're able to get so much more done because you give yourself that peace. It's not constantly running over yourself. You moreover know what you are and what you're going for.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better than that. That's awesome. And it's true. Meditation is life-changing. I need to do it more. I use this app called Simple Habit, and it works pretty well. It's like a daily thing where you have all these different things, whether it's gratitude or whether it's like overcoming strife or sleeping or all these different things. I would say that's one of the biggest things is I think in culture it's not accepted. Like fully, like, what is meditation? Yeah. Like, that's weird. Like, I can't do that.
Only monks do that.
Yeah. And that's the whole point of it. It's like, if you think that you can't do it, you should do it, because like that, it's the calming of your mind. Like,
for sure.
You thinking you can't do it is the reason that you should be doing it.
Right. So. And when we look at the most like successful people, they're the most woke, not in the bad way. Yeah. The most, the awake with their own selves, Yeah.
Go woke, go broke.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They better.
we could do it another hour and a half.
Yeah, right.
But this has been incredible. I think that people are going to take a lot from this. I'm appreciative for you for putting yourself out there and sharing those things with people. I love that. That's what this is all about. Like, I think it's funny, the daily intention, because that's what this is born on, the weekly intention. Insane. How can I set more conscious decisions for my life to just get better over time, whether that's loving myself or being more fit or whatever. So, with that being said, I kind of warned you about this, but it is the weekly intention. So I always like to leave people with, like, if you could take one thing today, based on your experience, and give that to somebody so they could run with it, improve the quality of their thoughts and improve the quality of their life, what would you say to somebody?
I would say, well, two things is one day at a time, because we often just get so overwhelmed with tomorrow. And like we've talked about, tomorrow is not promised. So we have just what's in front of us today. And then be kind to yourself. Self-forgiveness is the biggest thing. If we're not kind to ourselves and we don't heal our childlike selves, you know, we can't expect to be whole people moving forward. So
heal your childlike self.
Yeah.
Be kind to yourself one day at a time.
Exactly.
Very simple, very to the point. This is awesome. I love it. Like I said before, subscribe. I'm trying to grow this thing. Like, this is my passion. This is what I love to do. So share it with people. Tell people about it. Like it. Whatever you want to do. I think that this is the best message I've shared so far. Check her out. She's on Instagram at Rachel Price. I think is your
Yes.
YouTube the same thing?
Yes.
Rachel Price Fitness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Rachel Price.
Those are the two places where people find you, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Very cool. Thank you for being
so good
here.
to be here.
Thank you, everybody. And until next time, this is Michael and Rachel with the Weekly Intention. Take care.
Bye, guys.